Ravi, you have to write your country there. So, so everyone's going mute, I think. Yes. So Ravi is in Lebanon. But so can what we can do is we can actually start early. There is definitely always good to take your time. So maybe before I get you in, what I normally do, let me do that. Put it up there so that we don't waste your time. So what we are doing today,
But
yeah, yeah, Ken.
you're welcome to introduce your series if you'd like,
Yes, I
Vikram.
have. I'm going to do it properly. I'm going to do it properly this time. Because I well, look, right now it's launching circles. So today, of course, we are doing this launch of all four together, and I wanted all four to be highlighted as separate areas of work. So global environmental mediation, climate change, natural disaster, and sustainability, all four happening. But information now, Ken, what's going to happen is that information people have to pick up from the website. Social media posts, I think, take too much time and they don't reach as many people as they should. So I think that best is to come here to mediatorvikram.com, find information as to what's happening, which I will, of course, put down here right now. So basically, of course, connect. All the connection options are here. So World Mediation Circle, all these circles are part of the World Mediation Circle, and what it is all about is about a humanistic approach, moral values, relationships, all that. So that's what it's all about. Idea being, let's go to the grassroots, identify those people with the mediator mindset and the peacemaker mindset, create a circle around them in schools, communities, colleges, organizations, so that the numbers that we need are going to come from there. It's not going to come from the top bottom. It's not going to happen. So let's bring that. So it's a grassroots movement there. Each one of you has to definitely start working on this. And of course, there's a form here where you can fill the form and if you want to join it. Again, what I have to decide is whether I'm going to charge people to be part of the circle. Right now, what I've said is just become a patron. And patron, you can be at $5 a month also. But even if that doesn't happen, then we'll have to find a way to charge people. But let's see. Okay, so mediation circles, all the various ones that have already been launched, which are all here, YouTube, the links are here. You can watch those. And yes, we now reached 17th is coming up on the 7th. This is Israel Palestine Mediation Circle comes up on the 7th. So that'll be number 17. And then we have the all whatever's happened in the year, all those videos and YouTube links, everything is here. So that's it. Ken, anything else should I point out? Is there anything that I should tell people about? No. Okay. So, okay. So we'll get all of you in later after Ken finishes. We can keep some time, Ken, later to talk to them, their views. Yep. So, Ken, it's all about you and the launch of the circles and all that.
Well, today I think is all about the planet. Um, I'd like to start with a kind of fundamental idea that I think is important in the way that we think about our relationship to the planet and to the environment and to ecology and climate and all of those things. We ordinarily think of ourselves as being located in an environment, suggesting that we and the environment are separate. But the reality is that we have no separate existence from our environment. We require an environment uh, in order to simply exist. This was phrased very nicely by a U.S. Uh, astrophysicist whose name was Carl Sagan. And what he said was, in order to make a cup of tea, you first have to invent the universe. And in order to do any of the things that we do in life, we require food and water. We require shelter. We require safety. We require um, a place to stand, air to breathe. We require health. And all of these are sensitively dependent on our environment. To put it in a slightly different way, we and our environment, or if I can put it even more powerfully, we and they no longer exist. We are, once we adopt a planetary perspective, all there is us. And therefore, the destruction of one group of people or the destruction of one area of the planet is the destruction of yourself. And so what we have to see is that the environment, we and our environment are one. That's the first piece. There's a second piece, and that is what we know about the nature of environmental change. And here's the first thing that we know, and we know it by looking at the nature of weather. And that is called the butterfly effect. I think many of you will have heard of the butterfly effect. It is mathematically proven, which is the highest form of proof that we have, that the flapping of the wings of a butterfly in the Amazonian rainforest can produce a tornado in Texas several months later. How is that possible? And the answer is that the weather on our planet is what is called chaotic, and the scientific definition of chaos is sensitive dependence on initial conditions. So the weather is so sensitively dependent on tiny fluctuations in atmospheric conditions that it becomes possible for a small change in one area to produce a very large change in another area. I don't think we have actually allowed this to sink in very deeply. But what it means is that the war which is currently taking place in the Middle East, in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, the war in Sudan, all of these are having a global impact on the environment. And we can see it in a variety of different ways. Not only are they contributing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, they are destroying the ecology that is allowing various areas of the planet to recover and restore itself. So we can take a look at this in a variety of different ways, but let's start with a kind of scientific, well, almost scientific issue or question. Let's ask this question. What problems are we facing today that are global in nature? That is, that do not exist locally, but exist globally. And I think we can say that there are several of these. First, there is the size and density of human populations. We've now reached 8 billion people. Scientifically, we know that in order to support that 8 billion people, we require a minimum of 1.5 Earths. And we haven't got 1.5 Earths. This is a problem that is going to come back, and we'll come back to it at a later point. Number two, carbon dioxide and methane emissions, which are resulting in global warming. This is a very simple proposition. There are greenhouse gases and there are non-greenhouse gases. Oxygen, if the Earth had a significantly larger percentage of oxygen, the Earth would be colder because the sun's rays would bounce off the Earth and go out into space. But what carbon dioxide and methane do is they stop that radiation from going into outer space and create a kind of greenhouse effect, which traps heat in the atmosphere, and that produces a level of warming. And I can demonstrate this to you if you would like me to show you some slides. I can show you a number of slides. And we have the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel of Scientists who've been studying this for decades. And they show an enormous impact of carbon dioxide and methane emissions on global warming. Methane is about over 20 times the effect of carbon dioxide, but it lasts for a shorter period of time. The difficulty is that there is so much methane that is trapped under the oceans, in the permafrost, in a variety of different places around the planet, that it is possible for, once it is released, for global warming to really increase very, very rapidly. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Number three, we have the destructive power and availability of military technologies that continue to be invented every year in order to kill each other, in order to gain power over each other, in order to control each other's decisions. Number four, we have species extinctions and loss of tropical rainforest and woodland. One of the predictions of the Intergovernmental Panel on climate change is that the Sahara Desert will triple in size by the end of this century. That's pretty massive. One of the predictions is that various areas in the Middle East will become actually unlivable, meaning beyond the capacity of human beings to exist without air conditioning or some form of climate change. And we can already see this in areas of the Middle East during hot summers. And not only in the Middle East, it is impacting the United States, where in the state of Arizona, Nevada, all of those states in the Southwest, we have regular temperatures of 50 degrees centigrade that last for weeks and sometimes for months. Species extinctions we haven't spoken about very much, but we are increasingly killing off entire species. And what we haven't really understood is that there is an ecological interdependence of species on one another, so that to kill off one species means that it becomes more difficult for the other species to survive. There is a loss of drinkable water and a loss of arable land. These are tangible. Farmers around the world know about this. It becomes more and more difficult to plant the crops and produce the yields that were once natural for various areas in the world. In the United States, we can see now that it is becoming increasingly impossible to plant corn in any of the areas that are impacted by global warming. That is pushing the cultivation of corn north. Corn is a major food crop required for people to live. Another global problem is resistance to antibiotics and the cost and availability of medical care, vulnerability to pandemics, to natural catastrophes, severe weather conditions. These impact all of us. We've all seen more and more severe weather conditions happening as we continue. These, of course, are aggravated by global warming simply because of the fact that a warmer atmosphere can hold more water than a colder atmosphere. and therefore hurricanes become more destructive. Tornadoes take place in areas where they have never taken place before, etc. We have an increasing loss of biodiversity, so that even the species that exist have less diversity and therefore less capacity to evolve under changing conditions. Ordinarily, if you have a diverse species, some of them may not survive changes in the environment, but others will because they have genes that the others don't. There is unregulated deforestation that is global. The conversion of forest lands into croplands to raise food and even palm oil, things of this sort that are taking place around the world. And as a result of these, there is a increasingly global impact of what would ordinarily be local, relatively minor environmental decisions. So we can make a decision to build a dam in one place, not realizing that it will impact people in other areas. Nuclear proliferation and the willingness to use war and resort to violence. And again, if we take a planetary perspective on this, we can see that that the destructiveness exceeds our capacity to renew the conditions under which we live. A willingness to resort to terror and unending cycles of revenge and retaliation. The blood feud. How long has the Middle East been a source of violence? And the answer is probably thousands of years. A kind of, I would say, another global problem is a kind of increasing acceptability of cruelty, our barbaric treatment of torture, and an intentional targeting of civilians in warfare, so that in any war it becomes nearly impossible to avoid committing crimes of war. And as a result of that, we have a kind of increasing acceptance or a breakdown in international law that in the past has stopped countries from using various methods of warfare that, while advantageous if they're used against the other side, have a kind of moral bankruptcy to them. We also have a global problem because of the nature of our global economy and unregulated economic transactions, allowing for political corruption to extend its reach. Over $2 trillion a day changes hands, and almost none of that is regulated. Almost nobody is looking. There is, of course, a massive problem in increasing poverty, social inequality, economic inequity, and what is called the digital divide, in which the wealthy countries of the North are able to have incredibly powerful computers, and people in the South are required to make do with whatever technologies they can sort of patch together. And poverty has become internationalized as well in terms of the division between the global North and the global South. We have a kind of increasing acceptability of political autocracy and dictatorship, which I think is not just true for us in the United States and various countries in Europe. I think it's a global problem. A rise in prejudice and intolerance, of cultural hostility toward others, an increasing willingness to blame others for what actually are global problems, and attempt to solve those global problems by repressing others. We can see this now in a very dramatic rise in anti-Semitism directed against Jews, against Islamophobia directed against Muslims, in hostility of Catholics towards Protestants and Protestants towards Catholics, and not only on a religious basis, but in terms of how it is that we think about those who are different from us. This, of course, can lead to genocidal policies and ethnic cleansing. And it can also, simply by validating the prejudices which we have, make it more difficult for us to engage in joint problem solving, to collaborate with one another when the problems that we are facing, the ones that I've mentioned, which are not all of them, of course. We also have growth in the drug trade. And so that in Mexico, there's a kind of impossibility even of getting rid of the gangs and drug cartels, and in much of South America as well. There's sexual trafficking, organized crime, etc. All of these things are global in nature. And what that means is that no single nation state can solve any one of these problems. What we require is something that is beyond the capacity of the nation state to solve. And this is a massive shift, because we've relied on the nation state as probably the most powerful problem solver ever invented in history. And we now have problems that can no longer be solved by individual nation states or even small collections of nation states. We need to act globally in order to be able to solve these problems. So let me ask a different question. With regard to any of these problems, what will not be able to solve them? And here are the answers. One, military force. You can't stop COVID with guns. You can't prevent global warming by using military force. It's not going to work. Number two, the rule of law, legal interventions, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court will not be able to stop any of these events from happening. Treaties and international agreements are not going to work. Traditional rules and regulations, traditional diplomacy, nation states, as I said, capitalism and market principles have a great difficulty solving this, as you can see, for example, with the commercialization of ivory, so that it is economically advantageous for people to kill off native populations of elephants and rhinoceros, and various other indigenous species around the world. And the fewer of them there are, the smaller the supply, the greater the demand, the higher the price, the more likely it is that they will be driven to extinction. Well, this is not going to work as a methodology. If we look at COVID as an example of what happens under market principles, the answer is that you have a mutating virus, and the distribution of vaccines that have a base price that many countries cannot afford, or if they can't afford them, they can't afford to vaccinate everyone in the country. And where do we think the mutations are going to take place? And the answer is exactly in the populations of people who are not vaccinated. So the economic principle doesn't work. And I think the last one that I want to mention is that the United Nations, as presently constituted, is not going to be able to solve these problems. There's a professor at the University of California in Los Angeles. His name is Jared Diamond, and he's written two very interesting books. One is called Germs, Guns, and Steel, which is about how Western Europe prevailed over the global South. And the second one is called Collapse. And it's about how economies and ecologies and entire cultures have collapsed in the world as a result of ecological change. And these problems include not just deforestation, habitat destruction, as I've mentioned earlier. They have to do with soil problems, erosion, salinization, the fact that wells and aquifers around the world are now becoming more and more salty as seawater is beginning to seep in because we've used up more water than can be naturally replaced at this point. Overhunting, overfishing, human population growth, the buildup of toxic chemicals in the environment, and a series of other problems like this can create ecological collapse. The acidification of the ocean, ozone depletion, the removal of nitrogen, which is an essential element in fertilizer, the use of overuse of fresh water, the way that we've organized land use, chemical pollutions, etc. So we've got all of these things taking place. And now I'd like to introduce a new problem. And then we're going to come to the nature of conflict and what conflict resolvers might be able to do about this. But first, I want to be clear about what kind of problem it is that we're facing. So here's an idea. And it's an idea in mathematics that I think has some relevance to some of the problems that we're facing, not every one of them, but some of them. And it is the problem of exponential change. And the difficulty is that as a species, we notice the rate of change, and we may be able to notice an increase in the rate of change, but we have a very difficult time noticing when that rate of change becomes exponential. That's what's called the hockey stick, which is what we see in connection with climate change. Here's a scientific example that will help explain this to you. Imagine for a moment that there is a cup like this one that has my tea in it. And instead of tea, there are two bacteria that are in that cup. And let's say that we know that those bacteria double in size every minute. The question is, how much warning time do the bacteria have that they are about to overflow the cup? And the answer is, and let's assume that we know that at the end of 1 hour, 60 minutes, the cup will be full. But at 59 minutes to the hour, the cup is only half full. At 58 minutes to the hour, it's only a quarter full. Why worry, right? So the point of this is the bacteria have almost no warning whatsoever. In 1 minute, they double in size. So that at the end of an hour, they filled a cup, and in 1 minute more, they filled 2 cups. And the next minute, they fill 4. And so we can see that if the problems that we are facing are in fact exponential, as some of them may very well be, we are facing a major catastrophe, compared to which the wars which are taking place around the world today are essentially nothing. Here's an example. One of the predictions of some of the scientists regarding these climate change impacts is that within the next 50 years, the number of migrants, global migrants, who are simply fleeing drought and various types of difficult conditions, not to mention political conditions in their countries, poverty, disease, etc., is going to exceed 250 million people per year. That's a pretty amazing statistic. And what it means is any place that people are surviving is going to be pressed very hard by the migration of massive numbers of people into those areas. And if that's the case, many of those people will gravitate towards autocratic authoritarian leaders in order to be able to hold on to the scarce resources that are available where they live. Now let's take here's what this means. What it means is that there are, even if this is an exaggerated figure, what it means is that there are many, many pressures. Let's put it slightly differently. There are many sources of conflict which are likely to arise as a result of these conditions. So conflict is absolutely a growth industry around the world. And now what do we do in response to it? One, I'll approach it slightly differently. There are only four alternatives, four ways. That's it, as I see it. One, if you have a conflict, and this includes in a family, in a couple, in a neighborhood, in a workplace, anywhere you have a conflict, you have these four alternatives. One side wins and the other side loses. A wins, B loses. A has more power. The judge decides that A is right. A wins. Alternative two, B wins and A loses. But as a result of the fact that we have a win-lose process, we have lost significant sources of information about the nature of the problem, significant alternative ways of handling the problem, creative thinking about the nature of the problem, sources of human energy and being able to organize ourselves to handle the problem, the ability to collaborate and work together in response to the problem, etc. So alternative three is compromise, which is everybody gets a little bit of what they want, but not the whole thing. But what we represent as a profession in conflict resolution is alternative four, and that is the search for win-win outcomes, for solutions that don't require a winner and a loser. And how do we do that? By pooling our skills together to create collaborative approaches to problem solving rather than competitive ones. And how do we do that? The answer is through dialogue, through mediation, through collaborative negotiation, through nonviolent communication, through restorative justice, through appreciative inquiry, a whole series of at least 20, 30 different technologies that are available to us that allow us to draw people into conversation with one another that does not ignore who they are or what they want, but instead invites them to bring who they are and what they want into conversation with one another, not with the idea that what I want or what I feel is more important than what you want and what you feel, but instead to acknowledge the legitimacy of what we both want and we both feel, and then look for solutions. So, what is happening now in the Middle East is both sides are suffering. And there is a competition between those two sides over whose suffering is going to be acknowledged, whose suffering is superior, whose suffering is worse. But all this does is add to the suffering. It doesn't solve it. And we need to figure out ways of solving it. And the same goes for all of these issues that I've talked about, the ecological issues, the climate issues. And in order to do this, what we require is, one, an appreciation for the fact that indigenous cultures around the world have already been doing this, in many cases for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and have some knowledge about how to live in harmony with their environment that we in the industrial North have lost. And so there needs to be an appreciation for indigenous cultures and what they have to offer. Number two, there has to be a decommercialization of resources that are required in order for us to survive. So as long as it's possible for people to make money by using coal or any of the other fossil fuels, people are going to do that. Countries are going to do it because it costs less, because they don't have the technology. But what we have today is a plummeting in price of alternative technologies, natural technologies, primarily as a result of China and Chinese innovation in the technology of producing solar cells and wind turbines and all of these sorts of things. And these are becoming more and more scientifically useful and at a reduced cost. So what is missing in order to be able to make these changes happen? In other words, the point is we have a set of technologies that we can apply to climate change and to environmental issues. We have knowledge about this. We have scientific information. We have technologies. What is missing is the spread of that knowledge and those resources around the globe, an equality in the nature of that spread, because if we treat people in Africa or South America or anywhere in the global South without some form of equal appreciation of the fact that climate impacts us equally, that is going to reduce our ability to collaborate and therefore our ability to be successful. So what we require in order to collaborate are what I call the collaborative arts and sciences. And those consist of how exactly we draw people into partnership with one another. That consists of communication skills, relationship skills, emotional intelligence skills, large group processes, consensus building, team building, a whole series of things that in miniature, those of us who are mediators do every day. This is our work. We take people who hate each other or who can't get along or who disagree or who feel they've been treated badly and draw them into collaboration with each other by taking their sense of grievance, the fact that they have not been treated, in their view, fairly, and turning that in the direction of problem solving. So it's not just people yelling at each other about how badly they've been treated. Yes, it's important for people to be able to talk about their experiences. And it's important then to make room within that conversation for everybody to have had some difficult experience. It doesn't have to be competitive. Nobody gets to win in that conversation. And we do that by creating a kind of opening in the form of a set of questions that we ask that invite people to talk about what's important to them and then why is that important to them. And that set, those questions, which we call eliciting interests, allow us then to connect what people's experiences have been with the nature of the problem, with the process of solving it collaboratively, jointly, together, working in creative ways to try to overcome the difficulties that have been created by the way that we have experienced our problems. So the point of this is this: on a small scale, we have a sense of what is required in order for people in conflict with one another to turn their conflict now into a source of unity by asking the question, what can we do to make sure that nobody experiences this conflict again? What can we do together to overcome our problems? And this, of course, is what makes any marriage work. And it's what makes any family work. It's what makes any community work. It's what makes any nation work, is that ability to recognize each other as ourselves. The problem is, where did we stop with that recognition of others? And it may stop at religion, it may stop at race, it may stop at social class, it may stop at politics and political ideas. But the point is, those are not natural stops. They're stops that we've created out of our own pain, out of our own suffering. And all they're going to do is guarantee the continuation of that suffering. So the problem with this is it's more complex than simply blaming someone else. There are two very, very simple approaches to conflict. The simplest possible approaches to conflict are these. One, there isn't any. And two, it's your fault. And that's all we're doing on a global basis. There is no problem with COVID. We pretend it doesn't even exist here. We don't acknowledge it internationally. We don't ask for help. We don't collaborate with one another. And number two, it's China's fault because that's where it occurred first, or whoever's fault it may happen to be. That's just two kids blaming each other and ignoring the fact that what they have to figure out how to do is learn how to live together on the same planet. So I think we have a major existential crisis looming. But what's interesting to me is that if this analysis is correct, we know what the answer to that crisis is already. and that is figuring out what the technologies are, what are the methodologies by which we can agree and work together and collaborate and solve problems. So there's a famous statement by Adolf Hitler, who said, more or less in quotes, the German people were facing very difficult, very serious, very complex problems. I made them simple. How did he make them simple? It's their fault. The Jews, the pacifists, the communists, the socialists, the gypsies, the homosexuals, whoever it was. This was simply a lightning rod for people's hatred that grew out of their suffering and a desire to blame someone else rather than actually solve the problem. And that tendency has continued to this day. We see it around the world in terms of the way we treat each other and handle our problems. So now let's go back to global problem solving. I'm not going to show any of the slides that I could conceivably talk to you about. The question now is what do we do in order to be able to try to solve these global problems like climate change and ecology? The first thing I think that we have to do is we have to strengthen the United Nations efforts that are already taking place to do this. And we have to do it as mediators. So many years ago, I led a group of 100 mediators going to the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference. And it was the first time mediators had ever showed up at a climate change conference. And there were now 100 of us. But we didn't have the ability to interact because we weren't accepted on that kind of level. But what we did was we came forward and said that the Kyoto Agreement on climate change, which had been adopted many years before, had a fundamental flaw. And the fundamental flaw was there was no mechanism for enforcement other than what was called conciliation, but actually consisted of a kind of global arbitration that would last tens of years and then only be advisory. And we said, basically, we need a mediation provision so that if any countries get into difficulty with each other, there are mediators available that they can go to. So we came up, I'd never done this before, I wrote a treaty provision. And then we got support for it around mediators. This is what I did. This is when I was president of Mediators Beyond Borders at this time, a group that I started with a group of other people. And I recommend that you take a look at Mediators Beyond Borders. And if you're interested in climate change, there's a climate change committee at Mediators Beyond Borders. They attend every single climate change meeting around the world. And they push for conflict resolution between nation states, but in the entire global community. But what I learned from being in Copenhagen is that the method of diplomacy is also fundamentally flawed. That even the Climate Change Committee, which had a very strong interest in solving this problem, had no very significant commitment to conflict resolution. And this doesn't make sense to me. It seems to me that what we need to have is a much more beefed up, strengthened set of conflict resolution processes in the United Nations. There is something called the Mediation Support Unit at the United Nations. And it consists of a tiny little office located in the political unit, which is totally the wrong place for it to be located, or it would be right if it weren't for the fact that the political unit actually controls its operations and therefore kind of clips its wings before it even gets flying. and it has almost no resources. And there is also a Office of Ombuds and Mediation Services at the United Nations. I've visited both of these, and that's mostly for UN employees. We need something like that for the entire planet. So we haven't been thinking nearly largely enough. The title of this session ought to be How Mediators Can Help Save the Planet. And that's a kind of, very arrogant way of putting it, but I think it's actually true that mediators have not the answer, but an answer to an important question, which we are being asked. How do we do this? And we have an answer to that. We draw people together into dialogues. We put them into small groups. We ask them questions that invite them to understand each other as human beings, to appreciate each other's diversity. So that, and I have done dialogues between Jews and Muslims, between Israelis and Palestinians, between Catholics and Protestants, between Ukrainians and Russians. I have personally conducted these dialogues, and I can tell you, in every single one of them, people are able to connect with each other on a human basis because we recognize each other as human beings. And then we can begin to appreciate our differences because differences are a source of ecological strength, of evolutionary strength. That diversity that we have is actually a higher form of problem solving because we come up with much, much better solutions than we otherwise would. Okay, so how exactly do we do this? We've got to figure it out. Nobody knows the full answer, but I can tell you that as a result of Mediators Beyond Borders efforts, there is now a treaty provision available requiring mediation between countries that have climate problems that get into trouble. But this is only the first step. What we now need to do is to become proactive and build a culture of conflict resolution, not only from the top down, but from the bottom up, sideways, inside out, and outside in. Basically, we've got to build an understanding within civil society around the world of what it is that conflict resolution can do and how it is possible for those skills that we practice on a small scale to be scaled up to the largest scale we have, which is to a planetary scale. And that's the one we need to think of. So we need to think globally and act locally, as the phrase has been. And without it, I don't know that we will be able to survive because this is major, serious, fundamental, potentially catastrophic circumstances that we are facing. So that's what I wanted to present to you today as a set of ideas. Will we be able to do this in time? Nobody knows. But any effort that we make, every effort that we make, I think will save lives, just as it does in families and couples, just as it does in communities. It can help people see that the simplistic approaches, well, are terrific as long as the problem is simple. But if you have a complex problem, you have to have a form of problem solving that is at least as complex as the problem you're trying to solve. And mediation has that complexity. All right, so questions, comments?
Questions are going to come there. Yes, there are questions and comments. But before that, let me tell people that Ken's words of wisdom that he has put out for us are all, the recordings are all lying on my YouTube channel. If you just go to mediatorvikram.com, there's a section celebrating Ken Cloke. All the links are out there. So please watch them. This is valuable stuff coming to you for free, so you don't value it enough, but please value it. So can I have to keep telling people that? Because I
Well,
always say free is not valued.
thank you, and I appreciate that, Vikram. And what I really want is not for you to celebrate me, but to celebrate our collective capacity for doing this work. And that celebration is important because this is not easy stuff. Every mediator knows this is difficult, and we don't always succeed. So we need to support ourselves. But what we also need to understand is that there is magic in this process. I feel privileged that I've been able to observe this magic up close and personal for 43 years. So I'm just telling you what is out there for you to discover and to see for yourself.
But
Um,
but Ken, I would really like you to tell us what your vision on these circles is, because for me, like you said, think global, act local. So people should start these circles, a climate change circle in their community, in a village, anywhere. So that's the local part, and it's all part of the global thing. But what are your thoughts on it? How should it be structured? What all should happen?
from my perspective, it matters less whether it is a specific circle or uh, a local group that has a different name to it. Um, I've done some work, for example, with Rotary, and they have been places around the world where they're doing work, various types of work, and they are now creating peace grants, giving grants to local peace builders in various parts of the world. That's very powerful. So I think let 1,000 flowers bloom, but fundamentally, what we need to do is to create something that is circle-like in our communities. That is, we need to gather together with others of like mind. Um, we need to have what Michael Lang, who has been on this program before, refers to as reflective practices. So we exchange information about what works and what doesn't work for each of us. Um, and I think we need to approach this simultaneously with two fundamental orientations. One is audacity, that is, thinking big, super big, audaciously about the world. And the second is humility, which is the recognition that it isn't just us, it's all of us together. So if I ask the question, for example, I've been mediating for 43 years, who knows more about mediation, me or all of us together? The answer is clearly all of us together, no matter how extensive my experience has been. So that's what we need to do. We need to find ways of creating all of us together. Circles are a convenient way to do this. Because you've designed a form that is very useful. In restorative justice, circles are also used. And what the circle is it's a small group that draws us together, that doesn't have a single boss, but is open to everybody's input. And I think that is tremendously valuable. And then we need to connect. So if we just operate locally, we won't build the global capacity that we need. So I also want to recommend participating in groups like Mediators Beyond Borders. In the Middle East, we'll be talking about this more next week, but there's a group there that is called Combatants for Peace. And they're former soldiers for the Israeli Defense Force, Hamas, Fatah, and Islamic Jihad that have gotten together, and they have formed a group to promote nonviolence as an alternative to war, even in these difficult times. And they deserve our support. There's a group called Women Wage Peace, also in Israel, that consists of Jewish and Muslim women who work together to build dialogue between their different communities. There's an organization that has over 100 smaller community organizations that are all Jewish, Islamic, or combined efforts. And those organizations also need to be supported. So instead of thinking of it as creating one large overall organizational structure, right now, I think what we need to do is let 1,000 flowers bloom.
That's exactly what the idea is, that individuals take this up and create circle. Look, that you've been speaking about mediators beyond borders, and of course you've founded it. But for me, that's like, okay, there's a bureaucratic setup there, and they will do things because they are an organization. They will do that, but we need individuals to take this up, and because
Yes,
I'm sure it works there. I don't know what they're doing, but I'm sure they're doing good things there. But I want people to feel that they individually can do so much. They don't
yes,
need a organization to get into to do things. So just go out, do it, create the circle, and bring people out. Identify those people with the mediator mindset, peacemaker mindset around you. Put them together. So that's my approach there. I mean, I
excellent.
just
Yeah, I
putting it
agree.
out. Yeah.
I
So,
agree completely.
but
There's a group in the United States that's called Living Room Conversations. And it's a very large group of people who simply organize living room conversations between people who would ordinarily hate each other.
mhm, that's
And then you invite an African American couple to your house and an Asian American couple, a Latino American couple, some a Muslim couple, Jewish couple. They all come to your house for dinner, and we talk. And people bring the food that is popular in their culture, their history, and they talk about what it means to them, what values they have, and they connect with each other at a human level, after
yeah.
which it becomes very difficult for anyone to behave quite so badly.
This is actually a series I started last month. It is called In My Living Room. So just to have living room conversations. But the
Yeah,
idea was that all these circles that are created, people can actually have those conversations, like you're saying, and each one of them can put it out on YouTube, let everyone experience and benefit from that.
great,
So that's
perfect.
how, yeah. But I'm going to take up questions and comments. But before that, let me just put out what are the circles which are already up out there. Of course, the World Mediation Circle, the larger whole, everyone can come become part of that. But then we have various circles. So this is the India Mediation Circle. Can launch the World Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle because there's lots that has to happen here. Lots has to happen here, Ken. The World Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle, lots of knowledge lying there which has to be brought out. In terms of Michael Lang, what you mentioned, this International Reflective Practice Circle was that part of every circle, there is a reflective practice group created, and people can benefit from Michael's, of course, expertise. We're trying to figure out how that's going to happen because he has this institute that is working on, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, the institute is doing certain work, but I need you, Michael, to be here to do things. So we figuring it out. This whole thing about organizations and individuals is what that little thing that I need to bridge. So of course we have the International Commercial Mediation Circle, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Mediation Circle, lots of activity here. Mediators, in terms of goal number 17, I feel mediators are what it's all talking about. It's actually bringing people together, the collaboration part. So lots there. The World Refugee Mediation Circle, then the International Organizational Mediation Circle. Every organization should have a mediator. That's what the idea is. International Family Mediation Circle. And then we have this game that I told you about. Of course, a game for people to experience mediation and conflict resolution. And of course, Global School Mediation Circle and college, both of them really important. Lots of activity has to happen here. And this is what we're doing today. But this, of course, Ken, you have to take us through each specific area. Is there any differentiation that you want to put on terms of environmental, climate change, natural disaster, and sustainability? I launched them all together only to say that they are different areas, and you're going to highlight some of those differences and things that can be done. And this we are doing on the 7th. So that's up till now, this number 17. Lots more will happen, Ken. So Please, you want to differentiate between the four? Anything that specifically you want to point out for them?
Great, thank you. I think, Mandy, you had your hand up
Mandy
before.
comes later. Mandy comes later because there is something that Rabi has put in the chat. Says, how can mediators play a role in environmental and climate change disaster in front of the big, powerful countries and their strategies? Anything that
Yes. Um, I think that there are um, multiple ways that we can do this. Going back to the idea of the butterfly effect, I have something that I call the mediation butterfly effect, which is simply making small changes in people's attitudes towards conflict by successfully resolving disputes on every level. So simply practicing mediation is already a contribution to shifting the climate and the attitude toward conflict resolution in every country. So that's the first piece. That's simple. The second level is to uh, gather together a group of people who are willing to attend meetings on these subjects that are national in origin. So before every climate change meeting at the United Nations, there are climate change meetings in individual countries. In all of the countries that are represented here on this program, they all participate in this. And one of the great advantages of what Vikram has done is to have pulled together people from multiple countries with multiple different perspectives. And we do that through the periodic um, sort of climate change meetings that take place globally. But again, before that, countries figure out what they're going to say when they show up, what their climate goals are. And so it's possible to participate in those meetings as well. It is possible to create living room conversations about climate change, about global warming, drawing together people in the communities. And I call it living room because this is the United States where we, would gather together in a living room, but it might be, kitchen conversations in communities where people gather together in the kitchen, or it might be whatever area
under the
you
tree,
want to
Ken?
describe.
Under
Huh?
the tree. Under the tree. That's another.
Under the tree,
Hmm.
under the tree conversations. Perfect. uh, and so, um, starting at a local level, drawing together anybody who's interested in hearing about the nature of these conflicts. And if you want to find out more, there's a great deal that's been written about this. I've written somewhat about it in a book, actually, two books. One is called The Dance of Opposites, and the other is called Mediation in a Time of Crisis. And the mediation in a time of crisis includes 20 ways of improving United Nations meetings on climate change. And advancing these ideas, writing to the United Nations, there are 10,000 things that people can do. And what's most important is for people locally to decide what they want to do. One way of doing it is to meet with local communities that are negatively impacted by climate change. So I don't see anybody here from Kenya, but in Kenya there is a drought. So we have been working with, in Mediators Beyond Borders, we've been working with a group of pastoralists in Kenya, herders, people who have animals who need water and food, grazing land. And they are competing with each other and fighting with each other and with landowners over access to these features. And so we have helped train them in conflict resolution techniques so that instead of shooting each other, they can sit down together and negotiate solutions that work for everybody.
But Ken, you think
Yes.
United Nation is still relevant? It's, it's
I wouldn't say still, I would say not yet relevant, because I don't think it has yet been relevant in the way that it needs to be. It doesn't even have to be the United Nations, but the point is, if we face a global problem, we require global solutions. Oops. So I'm hoping that that helps. And
that's
uh,
yeah. We'll
yeah,
talk about it on the 7th. On the 7th, it becomes more relevant, this discussion
okay.
about the United Nations. Okay, so Nauman, who's from Pakistan, he's saying Pakistan witnessed a natural disaster in 2022 in which mass floods were experienced. How can mediators and peace fellows play their part in order to address such challenges and catastrophes? Because now the threat that we face due to global warming and climate change is non-traditional in nature rather than traditional. Simply putting, how can mediators play their part in reducing the non-traditional threats that we face due to climate change?
Yeah, this is a great question. Really different, and it's not an easy, I don't think there's an easy solution to this. The difficulty is that some of the traditional ways are actually going to be very helpful, and an easier way of getting into making changes, but some of them will be obstacles, and make it more difficult. And so the difficulty is to figure out how to navigate um, uh, in that environment. And this is not just in Pakistan. I think this is a global problem. We have it in the United States, with how we operate in various communities and in corporations, where there are, on the one hand, massive numbers of conflicts, and on the other hand, a kind of attitude toward those conflicts, which is avoidant, or adversarial, and not collaborative at all. So this is where the work of mediation really takes place. Here's my approach to it, which is my phrase for myself, which is mediate your way into the mediation. Use the skills that you would ordinarily use to solve problems, to solve the problem that you're facing right now, of how do we solve problems. That's not a very satisfying answer, but I think that it helps us realize that until the problem becomes catastrophic, we haven't really got people's attention. They are too comfortable with the old ways of doing things, and to introduce some new way makes it more difficult for the change to happen. Machiavelli had a wonderful way of describing it. He said, nobody really believes in anything that's new until they have actual experience of it. And so before they have that experience, they aren't really willing to support it, or maybe they'll only give half-hearted support because they don't really know if it's going to work or not.
Okay, so
And that's what we have to navigate. That's our work. I think that says it exactly.
so Alexandria had a
And
comment somewhere between, you were saying, she said 100% scientists can state facts, but social scientists and I'll repeat. Scientists can state facts, but social scientists and conflict resolution professionals, that is mediators, are the ones who will make it possible to translate that into social and policy action. It was based on at some point when you said that's the comment. Then she wants to watch the recording. Yes, they're all available on my YouTube channel. Then I have a question for you and Ken. I noticed there are several different mediation groups being formed. Why separate it out? How would I choose which group to be part of? So, Alexander, yeah, let me answer that. Of course, Ken will also answer that. The idea is that every specific area, there is so much to do, and to make it all, you can choose whatever is your interest. Please be part of it, then further create circles under that into your region, into your community, wherever. So whether we can discuss that data, definitely. Then your comment is, I don't know. Okay. Recognizing that this is about climate, would it be appropriate to ask about how we can talk about the Israel-Palestine situation right now in the US when so many people have had that? I think we'll talk about that on the 7th. That's on the 7th. And then Mandy's question, which are the parties, people, countries, power against each other or humanity and nature? Okay, Mandy, that question, I don't know what the question is.
Can you say that again?
I'm also trying to understand the question. The question is, which are the parties, people, countries, power against each other or humanity and nature? Mandy, and two, participation in decision making consultation is a right of people and obligation for the state. Isn't it the space for mediators to interfere? I think, Mandy, I think we'll have to clarify that. And okay, so there was something on the chat and on LinkedIn. One second, I'll just open that. Mandy, you'll have to just put it properly, whatever your question is, and we can get you in. Are there specific examples of how mediation has already played a pivotal role in managing conflicts related to climate or sustainability? And what lessons can we draw from these cases to address future challenges in these domains?
Well, with regard to the first set of questions, let me just say I think these are great questions, and it would be great for the group as a whole to tackle them. That might be the first job of the circle, would be to look at some of these questions and come up with some answers that are useful. I think there's one global answer that came to me in listening to the questions, which is that oftentimes when we are doing a specific piece of work, we're focused only on that specific piece of work without realizing that under the surface, it's really connected to all the other little specific pieces of work. So we work specifically, but there's a general um, outcome, which is generic and which impacts others in other areas. So almost no matter which area you pick to operate in, you're going to have an impact on the whole. And in response to the last question, we have been doing environmental mediations in the United States for, in my experience, 3 decades now. We call them sometimes large group, multi-stakeholder consensus building processes. Sometimes they're called a public policy dispute resolution, sometimes just environmental dispute resolution. And there are people who are practiced specifically in this area. I have done environmental mediations myself, in which people have come together hating each other on completely opposite sides. And as a result of these processes have reached very powerful, integrated agreements that represent the self-interests of all sides and minimize the amount of environmental damage that would otherwise be created. I have personally done these, and other mediators like me have done them as well. They're very, really exciting, difficult, complex issues to tackle, and oftentimes they take place over a period of months. So it's not just one mediation. For those of you who have been to the city of Santa Monica in California, where I live, you may have seen Main Street, the promenade, things of this sort. What Santa Monica looks like was a result of a mediation that I conducted many years ago between all the various parties in Santa Monica, who then came together and agreed on a zoning ordinance and what was going to happen, what would be environmentally stable. This was over 20 years ago, but now the city looks like the way people chose by consensus that it should look. And we met and reached consensus with all parties. We presented it to the city council, and the city council couldn't say anything because every single voter in the city practically had some input into this, and they decided what they wanted. And now the city council just had to go ahead and do it. So the leadership was completely reversed. And that can take place. I've seen it happen in issues involving dams mining, a whole series of different environmental concerns that I and others have mediated. And so what I'm trying to think of is whether there's a lot that's been written about it. Probably the best practitioners of this are in Boulder, Colorado. That's a group called CDR Associates. There's also a group at MIT called the Consensus Building Institute. Harvard also has a group of people who are working on it at the Harvard Program on Negotiation. And so there are lots and lots of practitioners. In my community here, there's Alana Naster, who teaches environmental dispute resolution at Pepperdine, et cetera. I can go on. So it's the answer, short answer is it's been incredibly effective, very powerful, and involves a set of techniques that are a little bit different from ordinary day-to-day mediation. Mandy.
Mandy can't come in. How can she come in? She has to put the question in the chat. But I was telling you, Ken, let me tell everyone that Ken is going to be available. We are going to fix up meetings of the circle. Today is just the launch. We're going to keep doing that. And Ken is going to keep guiding us and to give us things like this discussion point that you said, how can mediators help save the planet? We'll put that question out and let's get everyone to give their inputs on that. So that's how it's going to work. But there is another question there on the chat there. Someone, Deirdre is saying, climate is considered a threat multiplier for conflict. It would seem mediators should therefore be at the center of the climate transition. Why are they not? And if they are not, how can we raise up the role of mediators in this space?
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much for that question. I think one of the reasons, I think there are multiple reasons why we haven't, but I would say that the principal reason why we haven't is because we haven't had the audacity. We may have had the humility, but we haven't had the audacity to be able to step forward and say, actually, we do know something that could be helpful to you. We haven't recognized what the importance of our global role in dispute resolution. And we haven't developed the skills to be able to step into political conflicts, highly politically charged conflicts, without getting caught up in the adversarial nature of political culture. And so I wrote a book called Politics, Dialogue, and the Evolution of Democracy, which is about how to engage in political conflicts and mediate political conflicts without slipping into the trap that is created by political cultures, which is this is not an easy thing to do. But in order to do it, we have to have a sense of what an interest-based form of political discourse would look like. So that's the purpose of the book, is to create that. And in the book that I just wrote, that will be out next month, called The Magic in Mediation, there's a chapter called Imagining an Interest-Based State, which is how to think about political considerations from an interest-based point of view.
But Ken, when are we discussing that book on talking books? You have to give me time for that.
Okay.
Okay. Now
well, I need to leave shortly.
Yeah, I'll get this. What Isaac is pointing out in terms of the legislation in Ghana, they actually exclude any matter which is related to the environment from mediation. So what is to be, because that discussion, that symposium on mediation legislation, the idea was this, that maybe the legislators do not even understand what they're legislating on. So what are your thoughts on legislation in general and in relation to Ghana, if you want to, that specific aspect that the environment is excluded from there?
I think that the most productive way of doing this is, if I think of it as a model, is to use the model that I described for Santa Monica, which is we bring together the various constituent parts, the multiple stakeholders. We reach consensus among multiple stakeholders. and then take that consensus-based set of ideas into the legislative arena and seek legislative enactment based on the consensus that the citizenry have already reached. If it's possible to do that, if you have a legislator who is very forward-looking, you might be able to get something passed. But the difficulty is that the form of political decision-making makes it very difficult for that to happen unless you have an engaged group of citizens who have reached consensus on what the problem is and what to do about it.
No, his
That's my
issue.
experience.
No, his issue is that the legislation on mediation excludes any matter which is connected to the environment from mediation. So if
Yeah.
legislators exclude that particular area itself, there's an issue somewhere. So I think a larger lobbying needs to be done.
Yeah.
That has to come in. Or what are the apprehensions that you think that the legislators have in bringing it
Well,
in?
I think in every country we're going to be starting in some different place. And the important thing to do is to start wherever it is you are at, and move the process forward. We know what the process involves, which is taking people who disagree with one another and inviting them into conversations and designing the conversations that will allow them to feel comfortable and participate actively and actually be effective in generating solutions. And I can tell you, I have done this literally thousands and thousands of times, bringing together people who disagree with one another and just asking them to brainstorm solutions to any problem. You can take a group of 10 people and ask them to brainstorm solutions, and they'll come up with a great list. Any problem. And so you can ask them, what are 10 things that you can do to overcome fear? And any group of 10 people will be able to come up with 10 things that can be done to overcome fear. And they'll be different, but the point is that they can tune themselves to the particular problem that's presented and come up with creative ideas that are actually really useful. And that's what we need to rely on and what we need to do. And I'm afraid I have to go.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay. Mandy definitely could not type her questions properly, so she's going to send them separately, and I'll send them to you, or she'll send them to you. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the 7th.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that this is not easy stuff. Saving the planet is not going to be an easy task, but I think we need to contribute our bit. And our bit is an important bit. It's a clear, commanding, imperative bit. And it's one that we need to stand up for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, they can unmute themselves and say thank you to you. Please, you can unmute yourself.
Pleasure.
I've gagged them enough. Now they can unmute themselves and say bye to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
I need
Thank
to
you,
gag.
Ken.
I think I have to
Thank
gag.
you. Bye.
Great to meet you.
Thank you again.
Bye.
See you on the 7th. Bye.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Mandy.
And thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you, Alexandria. But how did you get the link to come in?
The link?
Yeah, the Zoom link. Who gave you the Zoom link? I didn't send it to you. I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually
think it came through Facebook Messenger, and I put that into my calendar.
Perfect. Great. So because I sent you a connection request on LinkedIn, so I thought maybe because I didn't send it on LinkedIn. So maybe that. So anyway, thanks. Thank you for coming in. And the circles, the idea is that we'll create more circles. It's just this is some things that are putting out topics, bring topics out and create circles around it. And then these are seeds being planted, and lots more have to come in. Lots has to happen there. So Francis, you did not have anything to say about your natural disaster part?
Thank you, Vikram. Actually, I wanted to reflect on the fact that all of the components of the circle are related, and I don't know the extent to which it is easy to work that out. Obviously, that is the reason why we brought all of them together. But I've been looking at the dovetailing of all these related aspects, and I'm thinking that we need to have further discussions on it, because even the issue of investment, and this might relate to the I think it's Ghana, the issue in relation to the legislation in Ghana. Even when it comes to investment, you have this situation of it having an impact in a lot of countries on issues relating to climate change, the environment, and also natural disasters. In my own little neck of the woods, in terms of a Caribbean island, I do recall a situation where all of a sudden, after rain fell, a mass of water came through and wiped out a whole village. It wasn't talked about a whole lot regionally or internationally or anything like that, because we're talking about small numbers. And I think only one person died, but it was a whole village that was wiped out. And the discussion around that was somebody had built a golf course. And in constructing the golf course, it changed the waterways. Now, in the island where I live, we don't drive and see rivers flowing. You just see a gully, what we call a gully, or a sink in the land somewhere, and that's actually the route of a waterway. It's probably most of the year it's dry, but some rain falls, and all of a sudden it becomes a river. And you change the route of that, and all of a sudden that water is going through a village and destroying people's properties, etc., etc. Now, that investor was never, charged with anything or accused in a court of law or anything of doing damage to anybody's properties or anything like that. But I think more and more, I had attended a couple of weeks ago a similar talk in relation to trade and trade agreements, and where states are talking about how to manage these agreements. And one of the reasons, of course, is that there must be a mechanism when people come to invest, et cetera, to look at the agreements very carefully to determine. Obviously, a lot of these things have environmental issues written into them, but what they may not deal with very effectively is, if some damage is caused, how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to address it? And so that's one aspect of it. And I would say also that even if you have legislation that seems to be saying something like, oh, you can't mediate this, it's kind of strange, because if the legal system says that mediation is part of the legal system, I don't see how legislation can say it can't happen. So that seems to me to be unconstitutional. But that's an argument for you in Ghana to deal with. So what the point I'm making is that there's a great dovetailing of all these issues, especially in a lot of smaller states where something like an investment can have a serious impact, and that can be a problem. And it can also have an impact when the time comes in terms of our managing of situations relating to hurricanes, and the aftermath of storms and so on, where flooding is sometimes just as bad as the impact of the wind. The loss of beaches, areas which are obviously great areas for recreation in island states, and also can also have an impact on people's homes, those who build close to the sea, etc., etc. So I just wanted to point out that there is this whole issue of sustainability is in the middle of all of these topics: climate change, environment, disaster management. All of those things have something to do with sustainability. And it definitely requires people who can help others to think through and talk through the various issues and conflicts that will arise from time to time. in these areas. So that's what I wanted to.
Yeah, for example, the idea today is to, of course, issues. I mean, lots of issues and more issues will keep coming up. The structure of how to create a, I mean, the mediation circle was for me something which had to happen. So Barbados climate change mediation circle or Barbados environmental mediation circle, that also then needs to be created. So at the local level, there is something happening and you have people on the global level and that expertise is shared, experiences are shared. So that is the idea of doing this. I mean, so it's local, global, or working together. And Anastasia definitely has some interesting comment to make. Anastasia, you have your interesting comment on this? Anything? You always come up with some interesting comment. Yes, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Muted.
She's muted. Yeah, she can't unmute herself. No, we can't. We can't hear you. You're on mute. It's okay. It's okay. We'll get Malu in. Malu is waiting to come in. Malu, what? I I had of course gagged you today.
Vikram, I didn't notice that you was with me. I thought
Okay.
it was I didn't understand. Okay.
Okay. No. It was for Anastasia. It was for her, but she couldn't unmute herself. Yes, you can unmute yourself now. Anastasia is coming in. She's coming in. She couldn't unmute herself. You can unmute yourself now. No problem.
No.
You,
Go
you're
on.
Anastasia.
You can. I will come back later. You start.
Okay, I go. No, I go after you. You first. That's okay. Right. Okay, Anastasia, please.
We have this. Okay, let me give you this. There's a little joke.
We had an English situation here.
No, I tell you, there is a joke here. There's a particular city in India where everyone's so polite that if someone has, they say first you go, then you go, the other says you go. So there are two people wanting to catch a train and they keep telling the other one to take it and no one takes it. So let's not miss the train. Whoever wants to go and let. Okay. Let Anastasia come in. I asked her first. She could unmute herself. That was the problem. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a technical problem, but since Malu started, it's not. I don't mind. I will be heard.
You will be heard.
I think that what I heard is very, very different for each country. For my country, for other people's countries, as I heard, we need to have tailor-made solutions at each country. I mean, about decision-making policies, bodies, how to approach them. I think we must be more flexible. Each community must have its own, let's say, method, its own way of approaching. For example, in Greece, there's not much of community spirit. So we have to find out how can we build communities, community building, and try to push on a higher level, because decision-making is not on the lower levels, but it's more on the central government. Even municipalities and communities, most of the times, they take the responsibility out of them and they say, no, go to the minister to find a solution. So for me, it's not about having any more excuses, because really the planet is throwing us away. I mean, we're going to have a lot of disasters. Millions of people will disappear. We had, in my country, floods. We had fires, huge fires. I saw that in California as well. I saw that in Hawaii. I mean, when we mean fires, that means that all the forests are destroyed. So this is something that our everyday life will be affected. We will not have oxygen. We will have a lot of floods. So, not to repeat what others said, I think we must find practical solutions. I don't know yet how we can impact on the global way, but in the local way, I think yes, we can have like a small thing. I've done some environmental work when I worked in ministries, but years ago. And what I did is just, to try to find out these provisions in the law, in the treaties, where we can have some kind of solution. But now, mediation was not invented then in my country. But now, I believe what I heard is if mediators can go and even vote. This is important thing, not only to stand by, but have a right to vote in, big international organizations, some of them, I think this can change things slightly one by one. We know that a small step can lead to a huge change, but I believe that mediators should be more involved. Mediators sometimes are afraid of being involved in politics, but I don't think this is an issue. If you know who you are, you can go in political, let's say, bodies and authorities, and keep your neutrality and your vision. So I don't have something to add. I think for me, just the practical thing is to have the right to be heard as mediators. I don't know if only being there or protesting against something will be more efficient than having a right in these bodies, in the decision-making bodies of our countries and internationally.
No, Anastasia, the first thing that you said was that about just building communities. I think that will be one of the roles of these circles, is to build communities and creating a community within the community. The other thing about what you said about politics, the idea is to have an alternative to politics, advocacy, and activism. So that's what these circles are. Being heard, once that community becomes larger, they will be heard, but it's still the mediators, the peacemakers being part of that, and of course participants, people who want to in some way collaborate and get together. So that's a community by itself. So in a way, you're not building the larger community, because that happened later, but at least build a community of like-minded people coming together, and of course person with the mediator mindset and the peacemaker mindset being there. Yes, Malu, haven't now.
Oh. That's okay. Yes. So first of all, good morning to everybody, and thank you for this opportunity of being part of this wonderful symposium. So my point is just a comment about COVID. I was watching a documentary the other day, and I probably. I heard that probably this pandemic that we faced, it's not going to be the last one. It could probably appear another pandemic situation. It probably will become from Africa, or from here, Latin America. I'm from Brazil. From here, Latin America. Here in Latin America, specifically because of Brazil, the very bad manners, the way we treat our forest, the Amazon forest, the illegal fires. I think the international community has already seen this issue about the illegal fires of the Amazon forest. And they are very well aware of this. I know because I saw some news in France, even in the United States. This is all countries talk about this, because this is also environmental problem, and also due to an illegal action. Well, another thing is happening here in Brazil is that phenomena called El Niño. I think everybody have heard about the El Niño. El Niño is a direct consequence of the global warming. And to us here in Brazil, floods in the south, even in the cataratas of Iguaçu. Have you know cataratas in Foz do Iguaçu? The river Paraná, the Paraná River, was so full of water that the park, international park, between the three borders, Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, there was no more bridges there. It was broken, because so many waters, the volume of waters due to the heavy rains. And well, to finish this important issue, There are so many workshops created here in Brazil about the ESG problems, to discuss these ESG problems. Né? So this is for companies. The more adequate the companies are for this matter, the more valuable they are in the stock exchange market. So this is what they are trying to do locally. I mean, but should be. I agree that should be more national policy to take care of the environment. But if it's not, no, so at least they are taking care privately. So that's
But
it.
look, we have to do an ESG mediation circle. So Alexandria, that's environment, sustainability, governance. That's the other one's governance. So we're gonna have
Yes,
we'll have a mediation circle to take care of that also. That's going to also happen.
yes.
But the problem is, Malu, you can't do what you started off, what you said, good morning. You can't do that to someone for whom it's 11:16 at night. You can't say good morning to me. It's not correct. It's not right. Okay. And someone says good morning to someone at midnight. I don't think it's the right thing to do. So we are going to do away with these greetings. Now it has to be neutral. The greeting has to be neutral.
Okay, okay. So
So whatever the neutral one from Brazil is, from here it's namaste. I know you can
mm,
the Brazilian one, we don't know, whatever you want to say, but it has to
okay,
be neutral. Yeah. So yes, Alexandria, the thing is that basically because Ken he starts at 9 o'clock. He can't give me a time before 9 o'clock. So today it is 9:30. But on the 7th, because you move away from daylight time, so he'll move into Pacific time, it'll become 10:30 for me. We'll start at 10:30. So that's how it
Wow.
works for me. Yeah. So
all right.
this is the least I can do for putting it together. So yes, so Alexandria, what are your comments? Anything that you want to do, what you feel, how we should go about it? Anything that you have any suggestions on?
Oh, not really a comment, but just thank you for doing this.
Yeah, but people have to now take it forward. We have to, of course, this particular circle being at the global level, let's do that. But also, please, we have to create circles in your community, in your schools, colleges, organizations around you. Let's put the seeds there. Let's put them there. It's going to take time for people to appreciate and maybe adopt it, but at least we should send the communication out to them saying that why don't you create a mediation circle in your school, in your college, in your organization, in your community. Some communication should go out, and then slowly start creating something. But the whole philosophy is that there are people with the mediator mindset in those colleges, schools, communities. So it's all there. But Catherine wants to come in. Yes, Catherine, please. You want to?
Thank you. And thank you,
First of
everyone.
all, are you a computer bot? Are you a person? We don't know. So how do we know you're a person? You
Yes.
can tell us. If we can't see you, we don't know. Even if you could see you, also we would not know these days.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, for today, I will not be able to turn on my camera
Okay.
because I had to connect. I'm working, so it's really
No issue. No issue. No issue. No issue. Go,
dark
please.
here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on
Good
where
night. Good night
you're
for some people.
connecting. Exactly. My name is Catherine, and I'm connecting from Nigeria. And you posed the question, sir, on how people can connect. I think one of the things that I have experienced with the work I do here with the Nigerian ADR Society is having a central space where people like this. So I know what this is about, and I can act as, I will use the word, as an ambassador. I am well versed. I have so much knowledge about what this entails, and that way I can, you know, create the smaller circles. So at that point, I feel like it's very important. This is wonderful. It's a very brilliant idea, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I feel like after the launch, we could have, for each circle, we could have, I don't want to call it, I would just say a board. Yes. At their world, I'm a global youth ambassador there, and we have welcome parties, we have networking sessions, since it's a global platform where people from all over the world get to, network, talk about, things that, or the issues that, they would like to pose to the organization, and solutions that they want to prefer. So that way we are able to interact, we're able to share ideas, we're able to connect and take it further, and we can also collaborate. So
Yep.
it could be monthly, it could be bi-monthly, it could, depending on the agenda for each circle, because I believe that each circle, I saw the commercial mediation circle, I saw the I think sustainability circle and family mediation circle, like that. So they will all have like an agenda, yes,
And
created or curated, where they can work, and then they have like probably ambassadors that come in, and they get to connect, they get to have, will I say, workshops. Yes, they get to have workshops, so they understand what the vision, what the mission statement is for each circle. So they know that, okay, I'm joining this circle, and this is what we are about, and this is what we want to achieve with this. So there's no form of misrepresentation at any part, at any local level, at any national level, as the case may be. So that's when you talked about that, I thought about it. Like, for instance, if I want to start something like this in Nigeria, it would be very important for me to connect myself first to the vision of the founders. This is what the founders have in mind, and this is why they are doing this. And then once I've connected myself properly, I can share the vision, I can share the mission statement, and bring people on board, and be an adequate ambassador for the um, for the work that we are doing here. So yes, that's what I wanted to say. Thank
okay,
you.
so basically the vision behind it, the thought behind it is of course available on mediatorvikram.com. If you go the World Mediation Circle, the what you can read here what the idea behind it is. So this is it's a very simple thought, that nothing is not a complex kind of thing, it's simple. And of course the idea is that everyone, when they create their own circle, they bring in their own vision into it. So it's not the way, a structured way that people would want it to be. I don't want it to be like that. These are individuals coming together, so it's not like creating an organization. So we stay away from the bureaucracy aspect of it. So people are creating their own circle, bringing their own identity into it and taking it forward, and it'll grow organically. It'll grow in a way that we also would not know. So what thoughts you've brought in are really important. We want to give a structure to it, but let's just put it out there. Important thing being that we are out there trying to identify first those people who have that mediator mindset and the peacemaker mindset, identifying them against the aspect of let's go and train people. We are going to make mediators. This is not that route. The route is those people out there, bring them out, and then create the circle around them, and let them create the circle and take it forward. So I don't know whether that answers anything, Catherine. Does it? Yes, Catherine. Anything? Okay, so she's there somewhere. But Eunice is also there. Eunice, what happened? You put something in the chat. Why don't we see you?
Yes, thank you very much. I had a bit of
Mhm. Eunice, what? Are you going to say anything? Okay. So anyway, so that's what it is. So 7th, we have that India, the Israel-Palestine Mediation Circle, right?
go to back.
So we'll then see you then, and the Zoom link is the same for that, right? And any other circles that you want to create, please let me know. Let's put them out there. ESG is what just Malu just pointed out that needed to be done. So that ESG is going to happen for sure. But lots more. I've been telling Francis, what about the Barbados mediation circle? Then you have to have a Greece mediation circle, a Brazil mediation circle, a US mediation circle. All those have to be created. Lots of circles to happen, right?
Okay.
So thank you very much for coming in,
Bye.
and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you. Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Good night.
Bye.
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 Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
So now you come in, Eunice. Now you come in. Hmm?
Sorry, I'm still in the bus. I couldn't hear the talk.
Where
Yeah.
are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where are you? On the bus?
Okay. I'm actually going to Paris tonight.
From Scotland. From what route are you taking?
Sir?
What route are you taking? Paris from where?
Yes, I'll go by the airport, of course. So my way to the airport. There's
Oh,
traffic everywhere. So I've been on the road. Yes.
okay. So you heard
That
everything.
was a session. Yes, I do.
So Eunice, you need to spend some time to develop something in Nigeria. When are you going back there? When do you go back to Nigeria?
I think I'm going to be in Scotland for now. Yes.
Okay. What do we cut this live stream? First of all, I